Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the monument for the Windrush Generation anchor. It's going to be an amazing show. We're going to kind of learn at the beginning of the show. We're going to be retold some of the story of the people from the Windrush Generation, and find out from Patrick Vernon, the man himself, what's been going on most recently. And then we're going to kind of learn about the ship and where the Windrush is, and how it might be brought up by David, who's a real expert in kind of ships and bringing ships up and bringing big ships up from the bed of the sea. And then we're going to be hearing from Lambeth Councillor, Councillor Sonia Winifred, and we're going to be hearing also from Carol Williams, who's a cabinet member in Hackney Council. And so let's kick off straight away, and let me say hello to Patrick. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Michael.
How are we doing?
Yeah, fine, thank you. It's been, obviously lots happened. Yesterday was, Monday was National Windrush Day, the second one taking place.
And what did you do to celebrate National Windrush Day?
Well, I think I've always said that, even though I've been campaigning for it for a number of years and we've got it, it's bittersweet because it's bitter because the Windrush scandal is still occurring. And on Friday gone, I presented a petition with 5 of the high-profile Windrush individuals caused by the scandal. Paulette Wilson, who's had 2 spells in a detention centre. Anthony Bryant, who the drama sits in limbo, which is based on his life. Ewaldo Romeo, who's actually his younger brother, is Jazzy B. Michael Breathwaite, former teacher assistant in Islington, and Glenda Caesar, who's from Hackney, like myself, who used to work for the NHS but lost her job because she couldn't prove that she was British. We went to number 10, social distancing, of course, and we had a petition of 130,000 people demanding for the full implementation of the lessons learnt review, and also to speed up the compensation which they richly and deserve, basically. So it's bitter on that level, but it's sweet on another level because it's also about honouring and recognising the contribution of the Windrush Generation, and also recognising, actually, in 2020, we're a multi-secular, multicultural Britain, and actually that generation and other people that came from other parts of the world have shaped Britain to how we see it today. And one of the reasons why we're here this evening is that we do not have any proper recognition for that generation, and we don't even acknowledge the contribution of migration to Britain also.
And the kind of the like coupled with all of that at the moment, of course, we have the kind of Black Lives Matter movement that's become an international, outer-national movement, calling for kind of the rights and recognition of that generation of people. Has that added to the campaign, do you think?
I think so. I think so. For some of you who've seen all the media coverage over the last 2 weeks, firstly, it was around COVID-19 and the disproportionate deaths. Then it was really around about Black Lives Matter, and obviously it's great that we've got this global movement. And I've been in contact with some of the key organisers of Black Lives Matter in the UK, and it's really fantastic. You've got some fantastic, dynamic Black women who are pushing the agenda, which is really brilliant. But also we have to recognise that we've had our own Black Lives Matter and I Can't Breathe in this country for many decades of people dying in custody. But also it's actually presented this opportunity, because as part of that process, and with the removal of Edward Colston's statue in Bristol, which people have been campaigning for many years, and people power just dumped it into the sea. I compare that to the Berlin Wall coming down in 1989. It's one of those symbolic gestures, symbolic movements, and it's actually given the permission for us to have this national debate about what is history, who is our heroes, who are heroes and sheroes, good, bad, and the ugly. And in this context, we can talk about this project that you're going to find out more about this evening, about we need other types of memorial and monuments. As I've been quoted on TV quite a few times, we've got more memorials about cats and dogs, slave traders, than about our history in Britain. And that's an indictment on this country. but also it's about us as well. What can we do? I know there've been a number of attempts to have and acknowledge our memorials. The Mary Seacole statue, that took 15 years to raise the money to get her placed in the ground at St Thomas Hospital. So respect to everyone that was involved in that. And I played my little bit because she was voted Great Black Britain in 2004, and that helped towards that. And then the other project which I've been closely involved in is the Memorial 2007, having a memorial in Hyde Park, recognising the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. That campaign is still going, run by OCU, and and so there's many examples. And what we're presenting tonight is another opportunity for more recognition of the history, but something which is powerful as well.
So what's important about this anchor, Patrick?
Well, I think you're going to blame Max, who'll be speaking later on today on the second panel, because he convinced me about this probably about 15, 16 months ago. And essentially, it was in the height of the Windrush stuff scandal, busy campaigning on that. And then Max contacted me and told me about he's found a ship, he knows where it is, and he explained the importance of the anchors. And in many ways, anchors are quite important because anchors, if you look at it, it's about laying the foundation, about journeying. And these are the kind of experiences that my parents had when they first came to Britain from Jamaica in the late 50s, laying the foundation. If I look at my family, there are about there's about three and a half generations of Vernons in Wolverhampton. My parents still going strong in the late 80s, and it's really fantastic. They're both alive and they're shielded, but they're great. And I've got my sisters, I've got nieces and great nieces, and and it's great as a family. And we have these weekly Zoom calls, a bit like the Boltons online, which is lovely. And that's part of that history. They laid the foundations for all of us to exceed and to do what we need to do. That's part of that. And that story is for any family of any Black and minority ethnic family in Britain, and any family, any migrants have come here. That's part of that process. But the sad thing about it, why the anchors is really important, is the symbolism of Windrush itself, the ship, the movement, and credit to the work of Arthur Torrington and the late Sam King. They put down the foundations to ensure that Windrush was a name, that the concept of Windrush Generation was something that we now, I'm not quite sure if it's already in the Oxford Dictionary. If not, it should be in there. Debate. So credit to them, they laid the foundations and all the work that has been doing for many years. But now the question is, how do we use the concept of Windrush to bring the country together and to celebrate and to acknowledge the history, whilst at the same time recognizing that it's about exploring the identity of Britishness, and that's what it's all about as well. So for the anchors, and it could have been any ship. I mean, the question I've been asked all the time. I didn't sit in the Windrush. I never went in the Windrush ship. I've got no connection with Windrush ship. It's not about the connection with the ship. It's about the connection of a moment in time in British history of journeying. And it could have been a ship. Ironically, more people travelled on planes than ships.
BOAC. We could have.
So maybe we should call it the BOAC, whatever it is. The cabin. Or whatever it is. But if you watch David Olusogu's TV program, The Secret Files, he breaks it down and explains why this particular ship was chosen compared to the ships, because there was a fear factor by the British government at the time that this ship would somehow, the passengers on the ship would somehow cause mayhem and all kind of stuff. There were really racist, dodgy misinformation written about the passengers on that ship, and most of them had served in the Second World War. This is the worst thing about it. They'd served in the Second World War for the king and country, and they'll come back to Britain as they were invited. I mean, and there's a whole debate about invited. Okay, they didn't get a personal written letter from the government, but they were invited because of the British Nationality Act of 1948. That was the invitation. They were invited. When they arrived here, they were seen as British citizens. They could vote. They could do anything. You know what I mean? And yet there was this fear factor. And that led to the whole creation of the colour bar, the discrimination, which I know many of us have witnessed in terms of our family history, and we still bear the scars of that even today, sadly.
Okay, well, we're going to hear some more about that later on, particularly in the second panel. But having heard a little bit about the ship, why don't we talk to David And David is a salvage expert. This is the man who, when I listened to David, I was just amazed. I kind of felt like an 11-year-old boy. And it just sounded kind of so exciting, your job and what you do, David. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I should explain to people why I'm here on the panel. If you're going to try to recover the anchor or the Windrush, you've got to find the shipwreck, and that's what I do. I'm a shipwreck hunter. So a little bit of a background for how somebody becomes a shipwreck hunter or what you do in your career. I have, over the course of 34 years, I have found 25 major shipwrecks. I have a success rate of 90% of finding the wrecks that I'm looking for. And I really specialize in deep water wrecks, where the average depth is over 3,000 meters, deeper than where the Windrush is. And during the course of that career as well, I've been given 5 Guinness World Records related to shipwrecks and the recoveries that I've made, including the deepest shipwreck in the world at 5,800 meters. So this is what I do. And because I've been involved in some very high profile, successful shipwreck discoveries, people contact me about, their interest in finding a wreck. Mm-hmm. My uncle served on so-and-so ship during World War II. This ship is very historical to this country. It hasn't been found. Would you find it? And I get these inquiries almost on a weekly basis. And I have to say, not every shipwreck, particularly in deep water, because it's very expensive, you can justify the expense to actually do that. So I have to make a judgment about which ones I personally get involved with. And last year, about this time, I was contacted by Max, and it was shortly after I was involved in another fairly high-profile project, nothing to do with a shipwreck. This was an airplane. I led when the plane that was carrying the Argentinian footballer Emiliano Sala crashed in the channel. The government decided they weren't going to search for it, and I felt that was wrong. And I offered my services to Sala's family to lead a search to find it. We raised funding on GoFundMe, just like we're doing now, and very, very quickly we raised enough money, and I led a team to go out there and search for the wreck, and we found it in 2 hours. And this would have never happened unless, I put my hand up and other people supported me in actually doing it. And as everybody probably knows, Emiliano Sala's body was found and recovered, so at least one family had a body to bury. But also it revealed that Sala had carbon monoxide poisoning, so it would help in understanding what caused the crash. And it was after that time that Max Holloway, who you'll be hearing from, who originated this idea, that approached me about it. And really and this is when I'm going to go to my formal presentation, this image really struck me. And that's the image that we've all seen anytime in the newspapers, in media, on television, anytime the Windrush Generation is mentioned. That's what we've been experiencing for the last few years. I predict 50 years from now, anytime the Empire Windrush Generation is mentioned, you will see that image. And it's iconic now. All these men hanging over the railings, their arms outstretched, big smiles, arriving in Tilbury Dock in 1948. And it really speaks to them starting a new life. And right in the center of that image, with the Empire Windrush in London on it, is that anchor. The men with their arms draped on the anchor, leaning on the anchor. It's front and center of it. And that's where this iconic picture and this anchor becomes symbolic in a way of these people coming to a new country and laying down roots. And I feel that myself. I'm an economic immigrant to the UK. I've lived here for 25 years. I've gone through the Home Office. I know what kind of hell that is. but I had an easy ride compared to the people of the Windrush generation. So this project speaks to me personally. And so that's when I decided, yes, I will give of my time, just like I did with Emiliano Sala's airplane, to do what I can to actually find this wreck and recover that anchor. So it's the centerpiece for this national monument to the Windrush generation. So now I'm going to explain my business of a shipwreck hunter. Where do you start in finding these things? The ship itself sank in 1954 in a fire. And I think Jess is going to go through that history, so I won't touch on it. It's about 23 nautical miles off the Algerian coast. And what you can see there is that bumpy bit of seabed, all in blue, that is bordering Algeria, is the continental shelf. Well, those colored dots, the SOS position, the Santee position, the SP position in yellow, that's where we believe the shipwreck is sunk. It's off the continental shelf in deep water. Now that's a bit of a problem because deep water is expensive, but there's a lot of advantages to deep water. Most importantly, in deep water, we find shipwrecks almost universally upright on the seabed. They're not on their side, they're not turned over, they're upright sitting on the seabed. And if we want to recover the anchor, that's critical. The next bit of research was into looking at all the navigation. If we're going to find something at sea, we have to have a starting point. Where do we search for it? And we had a position from one of the ships where they believed it sank, but I wanted to test how good that position was. So in the archives, I found an enormous amount of information, navigational clues to the position. First, I had the course of the Windrush. I had the SOS position when the ship went on fire and they put out a mayday on the radio. 4 ships immediately went out to rescue the survivors in the water. I've got sightings from 3 of them. 2 Royal Navy destroyers went to go help with the rescue, and they went to the SOS position. I have their navigation. 1, the St. Kitts picked up a lot of the survivors, brought them back to Tangiers. I was able to reconstruct that transit back to Tangiers, Algiers, and saw that it fit with the positions where we believe it sank. And then after that, once the ship was abandoned and evacuated of all passengers, the destroyer Santees tried to actually save the ship. It was a burning hulk, but it was still floating, and they were towing it back to Gibraltar when it sank. And all that information was available. And once I analyzed all that information, I was able to conclude that this sinking position where Santee said it sank was accurate to +3 nautical miles. Now in 1954, pre-GPS, we're still relying on sextants and navigation, just like sailors did for hundreds of years. So a position of +3 nautical miles with that method of navigation is excellent. It gives me a real high confidence that we'll be able to find the ship. And this just gives you a picture of all of that information plotted. Every one of those different colors represents a different ships. All those squares and dots represent pictures. You can see the coastal points are all located. They were ranging off of them using radar. So we have a lot of good quality information of where the ship sank. And what that leads me to believe is we'll have a relatively small search area. The yellow box there outlines the overall search box, of which is 120 square nautical miles. But inside of that is a high probability area of about 36 nautical miles. Okay, that's a 6 by 6 nautical mile box, about 7 statute miles. And inside that box is the highest chance that we have the wreck. But I believe we've got a 95% chance or greater of finding the Windrush inside that yellow box. So that is a really, I mean, to give you a comparison, one of the most important wrecks that I found with the British history is HMS Hood, the battle cruiser that sank in World War II by the Bismarck. When I searched for the Hood, I had to search an area 5 times bigger than this. in essentially the same water depth, about 2,800 meters. So this is really achievable goal for us. And we search the seabed using deep tow sonars. This is one example that I've worked with through most of my career. This one is towed behind a ship. So there's a cable connecting that big yellow probe-like object to the ship, and it's got sonar transducers on it that maps the seabed, giving us a two-dimensional image of the geology, but also of objects sticking proud off the seabed. And to give you an idea of the scale of that, this is working in deep red. That's me on the left, many years ago. So these are big pieces of kit we're talking about. But this is the type of image that we produce. Now, this is a wreck also in the Mediterranean, was blown up during World War II. It's a merchant vessel. You can see the bow. Even people who are not experts can see that is a ship. There's a bow, there's cargo holds that are open, and it's fractured in two. Now, that is a depth of 3,800 meters, and my company found that wreck in 1996. Now, moving on, technology has improved. We no longer have to rely on these towed devices. We can use autonomous vehicles. These have no cables. They're pre-programmed, computerized, with a predetermined path search plan to go down, mounted with the same sonars that we used to produce that other image, but higher quality, higher resolution. And the beauty about these AUVs is now, instead of just sending one out to search, we can send multiple ones out. This is a ship that was involved with the search for MH370, and they use as many as 5 AUVs in the water at one time. So your productivity goes up 5 times with this sort of equipment. And the imagery is superb. Now, this is a wreck in over 5,000 meters of water. It's an American warship. And you can see clearly, this is a very large vessel. It's hit the seabed with such force, it's created a huge impact crater. That's this big oval shape around the wreckage. And also around it is a lot of debris. I'd expect that we'll see the same thing with the Windrush. The Windrush sank intact. It's deep water, 2,800 meters. It will hit the seabed hard, but it will be upright, and the anchor will be easily reached. Now, once we find the wreck, then we immediately transition into the next phase, which is recovery. For that, we use robotic vehicles. They're called remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. They're connected to the surface with a cable or a tether, and they're self-propelled. They have thrusters, you can move them. It's like a big video game. Most importantly, these ROVs have manipulators, 2 arms, one on each side of the front of it. You can see it here, where you can operate tools for making recoveries. It's got cameras, lights, fantastic high definition images, and also various sonars that we can use to actually map the wreckage. But it is those manipulators that'll be the key to recovering the Windrush's anchor. Now, here's a close-up image of that photograph, which is such good quality that Max Holloway has been able to create a CGI image of it, showing the brackets that we'll need to cut away that are holding that anchor to the ship. You can see there's a lower bracket and an upper bracket. They've got 2 bolts and 2 nuts. So each one of those 4 bolts, if we cut those away, the anchor will be free. And at the top of the anchor, it's got this huge shackle. That's where we'll attach the lift line to recover the anchor, which will be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 tons to the surface. And we've recovered much heavier weights than that. That won't be the issue for us. And the type of tools that we'll use is like this. This is basically a rotary saw, just like the saw that you would use in a workshop. It's modified for deep water work. This is a one-off design. We will probably have to come up with our own design. And this one is designed to actually grab onto the object, and actually with that diamond, that saw's got a diamond wheel on it, will cut through with this hydraulic motor. And I'll show you how that works on this. Sorry, I don't know if this video, yeah, I'll try to play this video. Now this is a heavy steel box member. And you can see that saw is cutting through it like a knife through hot butter. Right. That's what we'll aim to do on all four of those bolts. And importantly, as I said, I've put this image again in there for perspective. You can see how high the anchor is up on the ship. It's above the main deck. It's up on the railing. If the Windrush sinks intact and even sinks into the mud a little bit, it won't get much higher than the water line. So we'll be operating clear on the outside of the ship. We have no reason to penetrate the ship, to get involved with any other parts of the ship other than that anchor on the exterior. So all of these things really give me, great confidence that we can not only find the ship, but recover that anchor. And this is the type of offshore vessel that we're using. In addition to supporting the fleet of AUVs, an ROV, it also has to have heavy lift equipment to be able to recover that anchor from that kind of depth at 2,800 meters. These are specialized offshore vessels. There are not that many in the world that have all of that equipment on it, but I'm in the industry and I know all the types of people. These are the people I normally work with and hire, and that's what we'll be doing once we get the funding to proceed with the project. And to give people an idea, a feeling of what this would be like, I want to compare it to another recovery I made in 2050. I mentioned HMS Hood, this battle cruiser I found in 2001. Well, when we were filming that wreck, we found the bell of the ship in the debris field. It was a remarkable discovery. And at the time, we were doing this project on a look but don't touch basis because Hood is one of its largest loss in British naval history. 1,415 men were killed. So we were doing it, but look but don't touch. But once we saw that bell, it started a national debate about whether it should be recovered. And ultimately, the Hood Association and other people decided that, yes, we should recover that bell. I was able to convince Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, who has sadly passed away, to donate his expedition yacht. We made 2 attempts, and in 2015, we recovered the bell. Now, again, we're using an ROV, the manipulator arm attached to a very specific tool designed just to recover this bell. And this is at a depth of 2,800 meters with wreckage all around. It shows you the type of surgical precision recoveries we can do.
It's right there with a sticky percent. There you go. Okay. All right.
So in that instance, it was this sticky pad that we used to recover that bell. And the bell was conserved, donated to the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth. This was all done at no cost to the government, no cost to the taxpayer. And this is the importance of that bell. It became a touchstone. So the man that you see on the left served on Hood before it sank. At this time, he was 99 years old. That is his son standing on the other side. They could touch it. Future generations could touch it. It becomes a physical connection to that ship, to the people who sailed on her, what it stood for, and that's what I believe the anchor will achieve when it's recovered, this national touchstone. And this is the last video I'd like to play that gives you a little bit of history about the Windrush and that significance as a national monument.
Arrivals at Tilbury. The Empire Windrush brings to Britain 500 Jamaicans. Many are ex-servicemen who know England. They served this country well. In Jamaica, they couldn't find work. Discouraged but full of hope, they sailed for Britain. Citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent.
The ship, which was originally known as MV Monte Rosa, was a German cruise ship that had been used as a troop transporter during the Second World War. She was seized by Britain at the end of the conflict, when she was renamed.
This is movie time. Leslie Mitchell reporting. An explosion in the engine room of the British troopship Empire Windrush killed 4 men and started a fire which spread rapidly through the ship. 1,500 men, women and children were on board, returning from the Far East. With the flames growing in intensity, the situation could have become a disaster, but there was no panic. Everybody behaved with calm and good humor. It says much for all concerned that the rescue operations were completed without further loss of life. The burning vessel was later taken in tow by a destroyer, but the fire was beyond control. The Empire Windrush went down completely burnt out.
Completely burnt out. But look at the back of the ship. This is the stern. See the white bit? That bit hasn't been burnt. That part of the ship avoided the flames. They didn't get to that. I believe the anchor will look exactly like we're seeing it there.
To travel this ship, man, I gladly strip my name of a 1 cow, 2 goat, and a Boer pig, and sell the land piece my father left, to be on this ship and to be a debtor.
Thank you.
That is amazing. I've become an 11-year-old boy again. Just the idea of being in the sea and going down and finding the ship, but the enormous significance. I mean, you know, the significance of the anchor, the significance of the time, and you know, the word anchor is so much the right word. It kind of anchors us in that experience. And clearly, David, you're the man for the job. So thank you very, very much for sharing your enthusiasm for your work with us in that way. Thank you. And next we're going to hear from somebody else, from Jessica Berry. And Jessica is the founder and CEO of an organization called MAST. And Jessica's going to talk to us a little bit about the preservation of the Windrush anchor. Are you here, Jessica?
I certainly am.
You certainly am here, and you certainly am here. Can you turn your camera on, Jessica?
I think I just did.
Oh, you think you just did? Oh, okay. It's just kind of...
Yes,
there you are. Yeah, no, there you are now. I can see you now. And so, Jessica, to tell us a little bit about what it is your part in this project might be.
Well, MAST, we do maritime archaeology in all its guises. Mm-hmm. And which means anything from finding, excavating, conserving, recording, publishing, exhibiting, lobbying. Mm-hmm. I think that's enough ings. That's what we do. And we've been engaged in some of the largest projects of the last decade. In maritime archaeology in this country and abroad. We actually did some work with David in Oman a few years ago, which was hugely enjoyable. So it's wonderful to be working with him again. And so our MAS's role in this particular project will be to take over once David has safely got the anchor onto the deck. It'll be perfectly packaged and then taken off to MAST's Archaeological Centre in Poole, where we will be doing the conservation and recording of the anchor and preparing it for the outside world.
And what does that mean practically?
Well, practically it's a fairly simple but lengthy process which involves soaking it for between 2 to 3 years in caustic soda, and at the same time conducting electrolysis, which will take away all the corrosion. Once that has been done, depending on whether the anchor will eventually be displayed outdoors or indoors, we will coat it in some special material, basically a oil-based paint, which will protect it from the elements if it's outdoors, or something else, a kind of epoxy paint, a bit like what you cover a ship's hull with.
2 to 3 years.
That's right. You can't rush these things.
Yeah, I thought he'd get it out of the water and we'd have our hands straight on it.
Well, we could always have a dummy.
Okay. And so you've been doing this for a while. You've done it with other ships, with other things that have come.
We have. The most recent excavation that Master's been involved in with our partners at Bournemouth University and the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth has been the major rescue excavation of HMS Invincible, which was the first HMS Invincible, which the British captured from the French in 1747. And then she later sank in 1758 in the Solent when she was weighing anchor to head off to fight the French in Canada. And she got, her anchors got stuck in the sand, and she wasn't going anywhere. And then eventually she got overcome by the weather.
And how, Jessica, did you get into the preservation of ship bits? What was the journey that took you into this role?
Rather a long journey, and very, very different, because I started off my life as an investigative journalist in Brussels and then in the Middle East, doing kind of, I wouldn't say war, more skirmish, and the Balkans, before coming back here and working mainly on Sunday broadsheets, up until about just after 9/11. And then I just somehow decided, because I ended up doing a wonderful story about a shipwreck off the Florida Keys, that wouldn't it be wonderful to do this a little bit more permanently? And so I went off and studied, excuse me, and I did a master's in maritime archaeology in Australia. And then I came back here and I began to work in the discipline. And it went from then, and I formed MAST in 2011. So we've been around a little bit of time.
Wow, because, you know, I can imagine kind of children saying, oh, I want to be a fire person, a police person, a teacher, a road sweeper, a dustman, all sorts of things, but kind of a maritime preservation.
Oh, archaeologist, it's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah. is a bit much. But listen, we're going to give some time for the watchers, for the people who have joined us today, to ask some questions. They might want to ask some questions of you. They might want to ask some questions of Patrick, or they might indeed want to ask some questions of David. And so the way that people can do that is to just kind of, I think at the bottom of your screen, you should have the option for kind of raising your hand, and a little blue hand will appear, and then you will be chosen. Jessica, go on. Would you like me? I prepared a little talk about the history of the ship, if you would like me to.
Well, why don't we do that first, and then whilst Jessica is doing that, if people can think of the questions that they'd like to ask of Jessica, of David, and of Patrick, to close the first panel. So Jessica, when you're ready, you can share your screen.
You. I will do so. Thank you. Oops. Sorry. Right. So my talk is a brief one, which follows on from David's excellent talk, just filling in the gaps on the history of Windrush, which has many has many aspects to it. So Empire Windrush was built in Hamburg in Germany in 1930, originally as the MV Monte Rosa, to take German emigrants to South America. In the end, she was the first to offer affordable exotic travel to the masses and was initially a cruise ship. And during this period, Monte Rosa visited Norway and Britain and the Mediterranean. Once the Nazis came to power in 1933, she was operated as part of the Strength Through Joy program, intended to reward party members with subsidized holidays. And that during World War II, the ship was then requisitioned by the German government. And then towards the end of the war in 1944, she was the victim of several Allied attacks. The two key ones, one in March, targeted by the RAF, and then 3 months later by the Norwegian resistance, who attached limpet mines to her hull. So by 1946, Monte Rosa was battle hardened, in quite poor repair, when she was allocated for the German government and refitted as a troop ship. In January 1947, she was then renamed Empire Windrush and entered service operated by the New Zealand Shipping Company on behalf of the British Ministry of Transport. And in 1948, en route from Australia to England via the Atlantic, she docked in Kingston, Jamaica, to pick up servicemen who were on leave. So more of this in a second. As David is colourfully shown, she sank in March 1954. In February, the ship had set off on her final voyage to the UK with some 1,200 military personnel and their families, including wounded UN veterans of the Korean War and some 222 crew. The voyage was plagued with engine breakdowns and other defects, taking 10 weeks to reach Port Said in Egypt. The fire began after a fall of material from the funnel fractured the oil fuel supply pipes, killing 4 engine room crew and knocking out the electrical power for the pumps and the firefighting equipment. The fire spread rapidly, forcing the evacuation of the ship, which was subsequently completely burnt out. Thankfully, the evacuation was orderly and the sea not too cold. Her still burning hulk was taken in tow by the destroyer HMS Saints off Algeria. Saints attempted to tow the ship to Gibraltar, but Windrush had become increasingly unmanageable, eventually sinking stern first at 37 minutes past the hour at midnight on the 30th of March, 1954. So as I mentioned, in 1948, she was en route to the UK from Australia and docked in Kingston, Jamaica. There was a combination of excess capacity aboard, a massive labour shortage in Britain, and the recent passing of the British Nationality Act 1948, granting citizenship of the UK and colonies to all British subjects, that led to advertisements being placed in Jamaican newspapers, offering cheap transport on the ship for anybody who wanted to come and work in the UK. This telegram, bottom left, indicated that over 350 Jamaicans, many of those who had served in the RAF during the war, had taken up the offer. On the 22nd of June, 1948, Windrush brought a group of some 500 migrants to the port of Tilbury. Many former servicemen took this opportunity to return to Britain, some hoping to rejoin the RAF, while others decided to make the journey just to see what England was like. The Second World War is littered with ships such as this, converted troop ships, and if it wasn't for this voyage, no one would have heard of her. What's really important is not the ship itself, but how it's contributed to UK multicultural Britain. This ship is important because of what came with it and what came after, and how the people who came changed Britain. So we don't just need to remember the Empire Windrush, we need to celebrate that we are now a multicultural society. As David has shown, this is the iconic image of the ship. Its anchor, an Admiralty folding stock anchor, the stock in its folded position. And it's how most picture the ship in their minds, with all those people hanging off the stern. But it's also a very delicate archaeological object. And once it's raised, everyone here has the responsibility towards it forever. And the future we need to create for it must be forever. This is Mast Archaeological Centre in Poole, which, by the way, you are all welcome to visit, where we conserve all the archaeological artefacts we excavate. The last 3 years, we've been conducting the largest maritime archaeological excavation since the Mary Rose, the first HMS Invincible that I mentioned earlier. And here is an example of what we do during the day. This last summer, we raised the cutwater. It's a very, very large section of the bow that hits the water first. This is 3 times the size of the anchor, about over 9 meters in length, but it's all in a day's work. It will now take 4 years to conserve this piece of timber before it's ready for the National Museum of the Royal Navy. And it will take 2 to 3 years to conserve the Windrush anchor. So I hope I've given you a little picture of what's involved, and thank you very much.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's amazing. People lead such exciting lives, and the Windrush anchor is such an important anchor to so many things, not just to the ship, but as Patrick says, to a time, to a place, to a history, to a people. Let's take some questions, because there are some questions in from our attendees. And so the first of those that we're going to hear from is Lucy. Lucy?
Yep, good evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm Lucy Harris. I'm from the Port of Tilbury, so I work at the Port of Tilbury, so I have quite strong connections with the Empire Windrush. For me, it's how are you going to use the raising of the anchor in an educational setting? We all know how important, you know, education about our history is, and this seems to me like it'll be a fantastic conduit to learning, not just for history but across many subjects.
Patrick, do you want to give a go at that one?
Yeah, sure. So I think part of the process of identifying where the ship is, recovering the ship, and preserving the anchor, at the same time, we need to have a conversation, dialogue with the museum, heritage world, to see how we can look at that, because I think it's very important that it becomes part of the education. So one of the reasons and one of the factors why I campaigned for National Windrush Day wasn't simply just having a day, just to have a tea party and to reminisce, but about using the day to educate and inform. And also that could have an impact on how the national curriculum, to make sure that Windrush is a national curriculum along with migration. And I think having the anchor would reinforce that, because, you know, lots of young people in school go to visit trips, go to Imperial War Museum, Maritime Museum, Black Culture Archives, and you need to have a centerpiece where people can do the research work, understand the history and the connections with themselves and what that means to them. The problem that we have in Britain, we don't have really many artifacts and objects that we could point to. And I have to say that it really hit me when I went to America last year. I went to the National American Museum of Culture in Smithsonian in Washington. 8 floors of 500 years of African American history, with real objects like the Pullman trains, and the Pullman trains are quite an important part of African American history. And each floor had some kind of physical artifact, and you could see children there, people there, just touching, feeling, and making that physical connection with the objects. How many objects do we have in Britain that you can take a school party to understand and learn the history? Not many. And that's why I think this is important as well. So it's having a dialogue with museums, the whole heritage sector, because one of the key questions we need to ask ourselves, I'm sure it's going to be raised, is where do you want to have this memorial if we get it? Would it be down in, down in Windrush Square in Brixton? It'd be nice, but maybe it's too cluttered. It should be part of the 4th plinth at Trafalgar Square. Should it be at the Maritime Museum in Greenwich? or should it be outside London? I don't know. I've got no idea at all. But we need to have a process and a dialogue and a conversation to explore that. We need to develop all the educational material to support the learning around migration, history, the Windrush generation as well. My fear is, and I wrote this article in 2010 about why we need a Windrush Day, is actually that we're losing the Windrush generation. We've lost lots of the Windrush generation as a result of COVID-19. We need to preserve that history, the oral history and the objects of which connects to that. So definitely it's key and quite very important. So welcome any suggestions that you have to work with us and to how we can develop that further.
And so if people do have ideas about how they could contribute to this project, or where they think the anchor should rest when it's ready to come out and to be viewed, if people have ideas about that, we'd really love you to put those ideas in the chat. But we've got a question now from Jackie. Jackie, are you there? Hello, Jackie.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, everyone. I've got two questions, if that's all right. One for David and one for Patrick. If I start with David, if that's okay.
Yeah.
David, it was just with regard, oh, sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm Jackie Walker, Liverpool based, and I run a community interest company that works with people from the BAME community living with dementia. So, David, it was so fascinating. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. It was, I was just enthralled by it. It's really, really good. Question, what, if any, challenges do you anticipate with the raising of the anchor?
Well, to say that finding a wreck in 2,800 meters of water and recovering, such a heavy object is straightforward, is being disingenuous. These projects are always challenging, and it's one of the things that I always say to people. Despite, my good track record, despite my confidence, very high level, there's no guarantees in this business. There's no guarantees that we will find it. I believe we will. Weather is a big factor at sea, but if you go out with the right people, with the right plan and the right funding, that's the key to give yourself the best chance of success. Given other projects, this one, has a lot of positives going for it in terms of, what we feel about where the ship is sunk, the depth where it is, its location in the Mediterranean. That is a good place to operate because a lot of these specialized vessels are working in that area. And barring some really sort of unforeseen sort of problems, I think we'll find it. I think the anchor will be there. I think we can cut it away, and I think we can recover it. We have done far more difficult searches, far more difficult recoveries than this one. And I don't want to make it sound easy, but with the right people, I think, I want people to share my confidence that, we have a very good chance.
Fantastic. And how long do you expect that to take, the whole operation, once it's found?
Well, it's how quickly you find it. That kind of search area with, the right type of tools, we can actually do in a matter of days. I have found quite a number of ships people thought would take a long period of time, and I found them in hours. HMS Hood was found in 39 hours. Sydney, a ship that people thought would never be found, was found in 68 hours of active searching. But roughly, you're looking at an operation, if you're doing it all from one ship that is equipped, you're probably talking 2 weeks, maybe less. If you've got problems, 3 weeks. If you're avoiding weather, it's that kind of duration.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And question for Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Hope you're well.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
How's Liverpool? Good.
Yes. Just giving a quick question of the location of the anchor. You actually answered the question I had. after Michael said, prepare your questions. You part answered it, saying any suggestions as to where it could be located.
Are you making a bid for Liverpool?
Hey, that's one consideration. We have the Slavery Museum up here. It would tie in very nicely. The one thing I would say is my big concern would be if it was external, outdoors, would be the protection of it, because we've got some rather unpleasant people in society, unfortunately, who would just love to damage it. And to be quite honest, we've seen that recently with the Throne of the Snatcher in the water. Whether we agreed with it or disagreed with it, things do happen to wonderful artifacts outside. So that I'd like to think would be a strong consideration for it to be located outside. My thoughts would be internally, inside a place would be better, because I think it's more accessible for school parties, because England is not, great for its wonderful weather. And it just means for every day of the year, whatever the place is located, it can be accessible for, as you said, school children, anybody wanting to do research. I think it would be more appropriate to have something like this inside. I think it would get greater visibility, to be quite honest.
Somebody in the chat has actually suggested that it initially just travels around the country, as you know, giving history lessons, being visited or visiting a whole range of kind of different communities before it settles in one place. That sounds like a really good idea to me.
Yeah. One of the things, I know on the ship there are 3 anchors. I know we've talked about the main anchor, and I mean, one of the considerations, I don't know if we can afford to get the other anchors, if it's possible, because if we got the other ones, then you've got potentially, it could be located in different parts of the country. But yeah, traveling or recreation of, it's a possibility. But I mean, I think Jessica could probably comment on that side of the preservation side. But there are some examples. I mean, if you look at the African and Caribbean War Memorial in Windrush Square, it's been there at least over 2 years, and that was done by Nubian Jack with support of people. And I was on the advisory committee. That memorial has, apart from the early days where there was like rough sleepers on it, it's basically, it's fine. It's there. People could go there any day of the week, etc. And maybe that would be the case as well. I think with the coastal stuff, that was more about a abhorrent individual, and for many years there have been a campaign to remove that. This is the opposite. This is about bringing people together, and maybe I think it should be somewhere public, so people can look at it and feel proud and feel connected. But yeah, indoors could be considered as well.
Okay, I've got a question here from somebody who's only called C15 Pro. They haven't put their number, their name in. And so it's given me the name of, I think it might be their phone or their computer or their something. But does that person recognize themselves, C15 Pro? If you unmute yourself, you'll be able to ask your question. No, maybe they don't recognize themselves as C15 Pro, but they do have their hands up. There's also the idea of the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton, Patrick. What do you think of the anchor being sited there?
Well, I mean, I've been Dawn Hill. Dawn's on the line from because she's with us on the line with us now. But obviously, BCA is an important institution, and they've got a 10-year plan of how they see Black British history, etc. But yeah, it could be that the BCA. But if you want my personal opinion, I think we've got some key things in Lambeth. I'm sure Councillor Sonia Winifred will challenge me on this. I know she will, because she's been campaigning for the government-sponsored memorial to come to Lambeth, which I think is something seriously to be considered. I see that the Windrush anchor is a bit different. It's about nation building. It's not simply about the people on the ship. It's about nation building, and the question is, where is the best place for it to be? I don't know the answer, to be quite honest regarding that. But I think we should consider all the options of where it would be. We need to consult with the community, with a whole range of organisations to explore where would that be, you know. And if the government wants to put some money in, that's nice. But it's actually, this is an enterprise with the community. It's about us taking an agency in determining what we think is important to us as well.
Okay, just finally, Patrick, you've just mentioned money. David mentioned maybe kind of a week or 2 weeks, maybe even 3. How much money are we talking about, David, Patrick, Jessica, somebody?
Well, on the, if you had to hire a ship to do the whole thing, and again, it depends on time and your contingencies for whether, you know, we're looking at a budget of between 1.5 to 2.5 million pounds. We've started the GoFundMe at a target of $500,000 just to get the ball rolling, because if we get significant public interest, maybe not reach that target, but in terms of the numbers of people, then I think we can go to other sponsors and philanthropic donors and talk to them. And I'm already having conversations with a number of philanthropic organizations that are operating expedition vessels that will find themselves in the Med potentially at the right time, that can do part of it. And I've had some success in doing that before, as an example with Paul Allen on Hood. So it right now is a piece of string. We know what we have to search. We know what we have to do to recover it. If we had unlimited funds, we could be out to sea as soon as we didn't have to deal with this COVID issue. But so I think we may find that it's not a simple situation of just raising enough money and hiring somebody. It's maybe a cooperative basis where we're using maybe some of these philanthropic vessels in combination with hired vessels. There's a number of ways to do it. The important thing is, between Jess and I, we're connected to this industry, and we know where all the ships are. We know where all the equipment is, and we will try to do it in the most cost-effective way possible. The key is to get it done. You know, whatever it costs is to get it done. And I think, you know, to do that again, without, you know, because there was a report earlier this week that we were going to the government, we were campaigning to the government. This is not, we're not looking for government funds. The government, they've got more important things to do in terms of making sure that the Windrush, the people who've been badly affected, are compensated. That is their priority. We don't want to detract from that at all. So everybody who's watching this, please understand, this is a people's project, independently funded. And because of that, there will be full consultation and full transparency to the people who are putting their money into it. So when it gets down to questions about where the anchor will be, inside, outside, what the money will look at, there will be this consultation. And because of that, I believe the issues about security will be less, because it won't be this small committee who've decided to just put this monument here, not in the wishes of the public, not in the wishes of the community, not in the wishes of the stakeholders, but we're going to be doing it in consultation with all of those parties.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Jessica. Thank you very much, Patrick. Thanks for setting.
Just one more point to add. So in 2023 is the 75th anniversary of the Empire Windrush docking at Tilbury. Wouldn't it be fantastic?
Get it up for that.
So let's do Jessica's preservation type stuff. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we had that monument on the 75th anniversary of the Windrush? Think about it, folks. Think about it. And donate now.
Thanks very much. Perhaps as well as putting your ideas for the sighting of the anchor, if anybody has any ideas about where we can kind of mop up a couple of million, that they can put their ideas for fundraising in as well. But thank you so much for setting the scene so well. And thank you for making it seem so possible. and so exciting. And I can't wait to kind of stay in touch with this project and to kind of watch it grow and watch it develop, and maybe even be invited to Tilbury when it comes back to the UK. So thank you all very, very much indeed. What we're going to do now is that we're going to go for a short break of 5 minutes. After our short break, we're going to move to our second panel, who are going to be looking at the legacy of Windrush. We're going to have Councillor Sonia Winifred, who's a Cabinet Member for Culture and Equalities for Lambeth Council. We're going to have Carol Williams, who's a Cabinet Member for Employment, Skills and Equalities at Hackney Council. Catherine Ross, who's the founder of the National Caribbean Museum. Max Holloway, who's going to talk a bit more about the Windrush anchor. And then we're going to have an opportunity for some more questions and some more discussion from you. So thank you very much. Thanks very much to our first panel. And we're going for a 5-minute break. Thank you. And welcome back. Welcome back to the monument of the Windrush Generation anchor, the raising of the anchor of the Empire Windrush. We've heard in the first half of tonight's program from David and from Jessica, who are both been involved in rescuing ships from deep under the sea, and from what I'm hearing them saying, that this isn't going to be a very difficult one to do. All we've got to do is to raise the money to let it happen. In the second half of tonight, though, in our second panel, we're going to be hearing from Councillor Sonia Winifred, who's a cabinet member for Culture and Equalities at Lambeth Council. Sonia, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Sonia. Do you want to switch your camera on?
It's on now.
Is it on now? Hello, I can see
Hello,
you now. And so the raising of the anchor, what do you think? What do you think? Is it important? Is it an important thing that should be done?
It is important. It's part of the history of the Windrush, and as you know, we've been discussing the Windrush now for so long. It's almost as though Black people didn't exist in this country before the Windrush, but we know we did. However, that's the topic, and I do believe that it's part of the history as we go forward. So I've had the conversation, I've met with the team previously, and yes, I do. I think it's an excellent idea. And Patrick is absolutely correct. Yes, I do have my reservations about Windrush Square, simply because we have other plans for Windrush Square. But you know, that's a conversation to be had. But yes, I do. I think it reflects. It's the anchor. It's where people made their homes. This signifies an arrival and a stop. The stopping. You know, you've arrived. You've made the journey, and it's the end of the journey. And so, yeah, it has huge significance going forward.
Councillor Winifred, a question I think I'm going to ask everybody in this second panel. What makes it worth like nearly £3 million?
What, the anchor?
The bringing of the anchor, the bringing up of the anchor. What makes it worth the spending £3 million on that?
Well, I think it's like I said, the significance of it, the history, what it is, the reflection of what it signifies, what it means to people, and it's part of the ship. It's and as David said earlier, when it's that picture of the Windrush as it comes into Tilbury docks in 1948, you can't help but see the anchor positioned there. So I think it's history. It's as we go forward. It's for the next generation and those after them. It's part of the Windrush. It's the history of the Caribbean people who came here to help rebuild the country. It's the stories going forward. It's almost, the journey is not complete just yet.
Okay, Councillor Carol Williams, I have you on the line as well from Hackney.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Thank you for inviting me to join the panel this evening.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to start with you with the same question. What makes it worth £3 or £4 million, the bringing up of this anchor?
So I was reflecting on that as you were asking Sonia, and I think, I don't know how much the statue cost of Edward Colston, the one that was taken down in Bristol. I don't know how much the Robert Milligan statue cost when it was initially erected, the one that was taken down in Tower Hamlets. But, you know, there was clearly a lot of money was spent on it at the time. So monuments have had a huge amount of expenditure placed on them to celebrate and commemorate individuals whose lifetime's work wasn't exactly worthy. So I think on the converse argument for that is, for those who have actually contributed positively to this country, then we should be expending resources on that. And I guess the other point that I'd make is, I haven't done the background research into this myself, but I understand that until 2015, former slave owners were being paid compensation from British taxpayers. And that's a huge amount of money over an extended period of time. And so if we are going to do that, then, you know, a few £1 million to raise the anchor of the Empire Windrush is a mere drop in the ocean.
It makes absolute sense to me. It makes absolute sense to me. So tell me a bit more about what you do in Hackney then. So
I'm a cabinet member, and yes, I am cabinet member for employment skills and equalities. I'm also the cabinet member, the named cabinet member for Windrush as well. So in 2018, the council, I took a motion to the council following the story breaking about the Windrush scandal, because I thought it was really important that as a local authority, we expressed our dismay at the hostile environment policies that were initiated by Theresa May when she was the Home Secretary. And I wanted the council to stand up and to stand up for those people who have been affected by it. And as part of that motion, I wanted to do a number of things to commemorate and celebrate the Windrush generation, to continue to call on government to end their hostile environment policies. But I also wanted the government to hold a public inquiry. We haven't had that. We've had an inquiry by Wendy Williams, but it's not a public inquiry. So those are a couple of the things that was the first piece of the work that we did in Hackney to respond to this crisis. And we've done our lobbying, you know, the sort of thing that you would expect politicians to do. So calling on government to pay the compensation and to actually fund a national media campaign so that those who have been affected know about the compensation programme and they can apply for it. And there are a number of things like that that we have done. Most recently, as a council, we really wanted to respond to the Black Lives Matter movement as well. And we don't want it just to be a knee-jerk reaction. We wanted to sit alongside strands of other work that we have been doing as a local authority, because I think, as I say, that we're a council that recognises the contribution that migrant communities have made to life in the borough. And so we responded to the felling of toppling of the statue in Bristol and the removal of the statue in Tower Hamlets by looking at what the legacy is here in Hackney. And what we decided to do was to review all the naming of landmarks and public places in Hackney, and we've moved pretty quickly on that. We announced that we would do a review, but it's not just a review in the name of a review only. So we spoke to student halls of accommodation. They've immediately removed the name of Sir John Cass outside of their building. They have committed to changing the name of the student halls of residence. We wrote to them and asked them to speak to the Sir John Cass Foundation. And they have made an announcement that they will also be changing the name of the foundation, which is a monumental step. I mean, that is such a big step for them to take. And I'm really glad that they are doing that. And we want to work with the residents here in Hackney, because what used to be the Jeffrey Museum out on Hackney Road has also changed its name. They changed their name last year because they recognised a long time ago that they couldn't continue to call the museum a museum here in Hackney is such a diverse borough by the name of a slave trader. So they changed it to the Museum of the Home. They still have the statue outside the museum. And what they are going to do is work with us as a council. They're in a consultation already. And we are going to also respond by consulting the community surrounding the museum the streets surrounding the museum that are called Jeffrey Street, Jeffrey Estate, and we are going to make those changes as well as changes over on Castlin Crescent, Castlin Road and Castlin Gardens. And we are going to, we've got a whole number of buildings that are also named after slave owners, so we're doing that. And I guess the last thing that I can point out is on Monday, I was able to announce the winner of a Windrush art project that we launched in 2018. We started this in 2018, so it was well in advance of the Black Lives Matter movement and the felling of those statues. We had a panel that was made up of residents, young people, Windrush campaigners and artists. And what we wanted was a monument, a statue, a public work of art that had was a permanent civic expression of the contribution of the Windrush generation to life in Hackney in the UK. We wanted something to symbolise the long-term and ongoing commitment from Hackney to provide refugees and migrants a welcome to this borough. And we wanted a monument that had local, London-wide and national significance. And we announced the winners of that competition that started back in 2018 on Monday, on Windrush Day itself. And they are, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell you who the winners are and what their artwork is going to be. So Thomas J. Price and Veronica Ryan, and they both have connections to Hackney, and they've been commissioned to do this, to deliver this major public artwork. Thomas Ryan's piece will be a series of bronze sculptured characters, and they will be inspired by images of from Hackney archives, from observations of Hackney residents, but also 3D imaging. So this isn't the image of any one individual. It is the total summary of us all and what we bring to Hackney. And there couldn't be anything more poetic, especially at a time when we are having this debate about legacy and how we celebrate legacy in public artwork. And Veronica's piece is going to be it's a series of large model fruits and vegetables, and they're sculpted in bronze, and they have been inspired by her childhood trips to one of London's oldest markets here in Hackney, Ridley Road. I hope everyone's heard of Ridley Road, at least those of you who are in London. So those are some of the things I'm working on in just one part of my portfolio. I hope I didn't take too long.
No, you didn't. And so there's something, how important is the kind of landscape of Britain? So how important is it to have statues, to have memoria to this generation of people? Who is it important to? Why would you change the road names? Who is that important to?
Well, I think it's important because we want a positive narrative about the place that we live. You know, as a councillor, one of the comments that I hear regularly is about space and place, and questioning our space and our place in society, not just in Hackney, but broadly. So what space do we have? What space can we claim? What space can we have freedom to be in? And a public work of art that everyone has had a say in, because we had a massive public consultation here in Hackney. So it wasn't just about the council and a small commission of people, it was a public consultation. And for everyone to have a say in that and say, actually, we think this is important, we think our space is important, and we think the narrative that public works of art, the narrative that it tells about the place that we live in, that's important enough for us to spend public resources and private funding to deliver that. So it's incredibly important. It couldn't be more important. And in fact, if it wasn't important, both sides of the Atlantic, we wouldn't have this conversation about whether we should have statues named after slave owners.
Councillor Winifred, you're from Lambeth, from a borough where the kind of space and place of the Windrush generation has changed massively over the past 10 years.
Well, it's changed, but there's still a community of Windrush. I mean, you cannot, I mean, back to the question you asked about names and places, I think it's about the contributions made to communities that you want to see reflected in your environment. And you have young people growing up, they need to feel a sense of belonging. And unless they feel that, then they continuously going to feel disenfranchised. Yes. And they, you know, there is nothing for them. They have to have that sense of belief, and so they feel comfortable in their own skins. Now in Lambeth, we know that the history of the Windrush when they arrived from Frenchurch Street, immediately they're taken to Clapham South Station, underground shelter. They then came to Cold Harbour Lane in Brixton to find work. And as well as finding work, they found homes. They made their homes in Brixton and Somerleyton Road and Geneva Road. You know, that area became the nucleus for the Jamaican community in London very quickly. And early 60s, those two roads had the highest level of West Indian home ownership in the country. Now, that's an achievement. That's an incredible achievement. So why shouldn't we have the street named after these people, some of these people? Because they set the bar for us who came after. And we then commemorated Windrush Square in their name, in their honor, and to say thank you. And I started supporting the Windrush Generation with the deportations when it was first brought to my attention in 2016. That's 2 years before The Guardian broke the hostile environment story. So we were working with the communities. And the compensation scheme, as you know, it's not fit for purpose. It still isn't, because very few people have been compensated. I suspect many will have sadly passed on before they see a penny of that compensation. Yeah. There was a concern, certainly the Home Office suggested that people were not applying as frequently as they thought. Certainly the number was quite low. So I wrote to every member of our community in Lambeth, sent a letter to everyone living in Lambeth, saying if you feel you're eligible to apply for the compensation, then do so. For those who are experiencing problems downloading forms online, I ensured that the hard copy forms were made available at the town hall. We funded free legal surgeries at the Black Cultural Archives for support with those applications, because I don't know if you've seen them, you need a law degree to complete those application forms. So it was totally unacceptable that people had to be going through this, and they needed the support. Now, here we are, COVID-19, and we see third generations of Windrush people, again, in the NHS, the frontline services that are dying. So we're still putting ourselves on the line for this country with very little recognition. Now, you mentioned the statues, Black Lives Matter. We too in Lambeth have launched an audit into all our landmarks and statues. And when we get this list, all our landmarks, our statues, road names, street names, we're also looking at those street names that we have dedicated to some of our Black heroes and heroines. So we want to see what we have done. In 2017, we launched our Equalities Commission, where we had looked at the inequalities in the borough. We've been working with those recommendations, and this very much forms part of this. Now, once we've completed this audit, then we will have a consultation with the community. It's an ongoing project, and I just feel that in Lambeth, it seems our community have been very calm about it, and there is I think there has been a degree of, I don't know, it's a sense of panic. And I think our community, I'm more focused on the inequalities around education, health, housing. These are the things that people are really struggling with right now. And I think those statues, yes, we will be looking at them, we will be taking them down, but first and foremost, we need to focus on those education and lack of our history, the curriculum, and how we change this. I think that's
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Thanks very much to both our councillors. I'm going to talk to Catherine Ross now. Catherine founder of the National Caribbean Museum. And at the end of this panel, again, there's going to be an opportunity for people who are watching today's conversation to ask questions. So if you think of a question you'd like to ask, if you put your hand up, and we'll get to you at the end of the panel. But for now, Catherine Ross, founder of the National Caribbean Museum.
Yeah, can I give you the full name, the correct name? We are actually Museum and the National Caribbean Heritage Museum. Sounds a bit of a mouthful, but this is why. Museum and is like our first name, our pet name, our short name. So whenever we talk to people, we say, hi, we're Museum and they know who we are. And we're that because we're a museum and more. We have an 8-part TV series on our local TV. We're going to be shown for the next 2 days on national TV. So we make films as well as the TV show. And we do the standard things that you'd expect of a museum. We have exhibitions and we give talks and whatever. So it's Museum and to you all, because you're a friend of us, but we felt we needed to be called the National Caribbean Heritage Museum because that's what we're about. That's our expertise, the Caribbean and its heritage. That's who we are.
Where are you based?
A city of significance, Nottingham. Right. That's where my parents arrived when they came from St Kitts, and where we've always had a home, even if the 9 children have made homes all over the UK. So actually the UK is ours, thanks. But yeah, that's who we are. And our uniqueness as a museum is that we have no building, we have no home. So our strapline is, we are a museum without walls. So again, what I said about we own the UK as a family, we feel the whole of the UK is our museum. We travel from place to place and we put on exhibitions. Now, when we first started, it was at a carnival. And we were told by the carnival organisers, carnivals are for dancing and food, not for education. So we soon changed that. And that was our biggest success. We had 1,184 people attending. There was this thirst for knowledge about our heritage, and that kick-started it. But now the major institutions of heritage are very interested in what we do, mainly because we get large numbers, but I think significantly because we tell the story of the Caribbean in a way that engages people of all ages. It tells some difficult stories. We do challenge the powers that be, and we say, look, this is what you've done, or this is what you're in danger of doing. But they listen because it's the way you tell the message. We don't want to alienate, we want to bring everybody in. And another thing that we found, we were told at a rather prestigious National Trust property that they've never had any black people there, but they'll put on the exhibition, but yeah, nobody will come. And lots of people did come, and a lot of the people who came were white, but they'd all got a Caribbean person in their family or a black person in their family. And they were like, it was meant to be for 3 months, but it actually went on for 9 months. Wow. Because people kept coming and saying, can you tell us a bit more about this? Can you direct us to whatever? So, you know, when I said we were a museum and more, we're sometimes a museum and a signposter. You know, we signpost people to other places where they can get further information.
And now, so the bringing of the anchor back to the UK, we can be pretty sure that there is going to be interest in it. That your museum in a way proves that people are interested in the history of the Caribbean, and not just people of Caribbean heritage, but people of all kinds of heritage that live in the UK have a real interest in the history of the Caribbean. And are going to come out to kind of to see the anchor, to learn some more, to learn what we can surround the anchor with that will give people even more information about our community and the history of our community.
Yeah, I understand about having something somewhere where people can go on a wet Sunday afternoon or the likes to view things. But we have found that it's better if you take the thing around to the people and they anticipate and look forward to it. So, yeah, I would say let's tour the Anchor, you know, follow our model.
We're going to be talking to Max Halloway in a minute, and we're going to and Max is one of the people that originated this project and has brought everybody together to make it happen. But before we go, just before we started and opened the webinar today, you told us that you just published a book, have you?
Yes, we have. It's called 70 Objects and Things. Now, that's not very, it doesn't have very authentic, my patois, but that's what it is. 70 Objects and Things, celebrating the contribution of Caribbeans to the UK. And we've got a Windrush grant for that, and it was meant to be done, you know, the proper manner, lots of workshops and talk to people and present artifacts. But we had lockdown. So what we did was we interviewed 182 people and got their ideas and information that way. We did it over the phone. And so this is how it is. The government, the powers that be, expected this book at the end. But what we've decided to do because of lockdown is we'll release a chapter of it, serialize it, right down to Black History Month. And so people can see it that way. And you spend time then working your way through that section because, as I say, there are 5 sections, and this first one's food. And what it does, it gives you the history of our food. Why is our food called ground provisions? Or why is ground provisions called hard food? So it explains all of that. And then it teaches you...
I don't want to cheat the book, but why are ground provisions called hard food?
Well, ground provisions, well, that's what they brought. The slave masters said, let's bring ground provisions from Africa, because they grew in the ground, to the Caribbean to feed the people. And then we call it hard food, you know, the sort of food that fills you up, anchors you down, and gives you a good day's work. So that's what it is. Ground provisions, because they grow in the ground, hard food because they're fillers. Lots of calories, but they're fillers. And, but some children nowadays call it just Caribbean vegetables. I don't like Caribbean vegetables. So we explain why not. And we teach them songs, you know, some of our old folk songs, like Carry Me Aki Go a Linstead Market. So they learn a little bit of their heritage. So it's what their history is from Africa, and it's what their grandparents would have brought with them, which is those songs and the rhymes. We're a people of recitation, aren't we? Boy, can we quote things and perform. So it's a lot of those. And the book also, we've specially commissioned some music. So it's not a boring read. While you're reading it, you can bop to the music, and that's really, really good. A lot of people have contacted us to say how much they've enjoyed that. But it's meant to be intergenerational, and we hope that the book will make heroes of grandparents, because we think, you know, 3rd and 4th generation will say, I never knew that. And did you go through all of that? And what was that really like? So it will start some conversations. Some of us would know we'd get some of that history when we sit in front of our mothers and get our hair plaited and so on. But this, in lockdown, is another opportunity to share stories. So it's intergenerational. It's not an academic book, though, okay? So you won't get all the history and all the culture, but it's a journey of discovery. It will make you, as soon as the doors open and we can all get out there, go off and find places around your local area, or make that trip to London or Liverpool and learn even more. Journey of discovery.
Thank you very, 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 very much. Thank you. And thanks for your enthusiasm about Caribbean history. And can
I just say something very quickly about the Anchor?
Very, very quickly.
Very quickly about the Anchor. I'm a Windrush child. I came here when I was 7, and I'm defined by it because I came then. I'm of the Windrush generation, but it doesn't mean anything to me. So show me the Anchor, and there'll be cheers and celebrations. Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's what I'd like. And I'd like for my grandchildren to say, that's the ship that Mama was always talking about. Thank you
very much. Thank you. Thank you. Max, can you
Hi,
hear me?
Michael.
How are you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about how you got involved in this. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I'm amazed by it's great listening to the girls there, all that stuff. I mean, because this is what it's going to be about is people getting even more inspired by what we're trying to do. Hopefully, if we can get something real back, then you know the stories and everything else will come out. I'm very impressed by everybody. They all look so professional. I hope I don't lower the tone with what I'm about to say. But I don't have any fancy slides like the other guys, but I have 3 props, so I'm I'm going to throw them up in front. But yeah, Patrick gave me 5 minutes, so I've written something out, and so I'm hoping that this is going to give a little bit of contextual background for people regarding what's going on.
We're all yours. We're all yours.
Okay, right. My late wife and great soulmate, of course, was of Caribbean descent. And, oh, sorry, first prop.
No, show us it again, because I didn't really see what it was.
First prop are the St. Lucian gloves. I'm sure Sonia will
what are they?
Like that.
They're a pair of gloves, are they?
St. Lucian boxing gloves, yeah.
Boxing.
The wife was very keen on that, yeah. But her parents came to the mother country in the late 1950s. And so my 26 years, last 26 years, would have been very different if that event hadn't have happened. Of course, that's on the back of Windrush. And so the stories, I feel, do actually kind of escalate just from a boat and telling the stories about one particular boat and the things that come from that. It's actually spread out now to different generations, different cultures and whatever. Time shared with Alice profoundly influenced me to do Windrush research, and benefiting greatly from our wonderful relationship, it seems only right to try and give something back. I've been kicking around the idea of Windrush Anchor since 2016. That came off the back of reading a piece by the poet Hannah Lowe. And Hannah's paper was about the Windrush, and it made me realise that much of it was trapped in the past grainy footage of 1948. And I started wondering how I could find a new connection for present and future generations. Developing that line, the anchor swiftly became a focal point, and I'll talk about why in just a minute. Anyway, in 2018, a few months after Alice passed away, I myself, I had a little bit more time basically to attack the project in earnest. And over the last 2.5 years, I've rattled quite a few cages. I even wrote to the Queen in April of last year to seek her approval. And in the true spirit of royal diplomacy, the palace reply was courteous but non-committal. They didn't say you can't do it. So I took that as being an amber light and went straight to Patrick and David and said, Jessica was already on board with the project by then. And I said, you know, how do you feel about this? So in essence, this is a basic project to recover an item of British heritage and acknowledge an overlooked factual event. That's it's in its simplicity. It's British history, it's your history, it's my history, a past with a deep legacy. It's right here and now, in our present. And recognition would send out a powerful message that speaks to our future. It's difficult now to imagine a Britain without the social impact of 1948. Our sport and culture sectors, to name just 2, would be absolutely unrecognisable. I can't imagine that, and frankly, I wouldn't really want to. So why an anchor? An anchor is a universally accepted sign of hope. But don't take my word for it. You need to look in a dictionary. So ask everybody, look in a dictionary or a thesaurus and just read up and see what it says about an anchor. Many people have anchor jewellery, they have anchor tattoos. mainly because it's symbolically associated with strength, stability, permanence and belonging. Clear values that are relevant to Windrush generation, their descendants, and reflecting aspirations, I guess, that are carried by most, if not all, migrant settlers. If you put 2 and 2 together, the anchor centre stage in the iconic image from Tilbury Docks takes on a whole new meaning. Just to reinforce that again, that's what David has been talking about. It's that particular anchor. If anything tangible can ever define that momentous event, which heralded post-World War II multicultural Britain, then surely there's nothing more poignant or pertinent than the stern anchor of Empire Windrush. You asked about the money. Well, first of all, that's not the money from government, that's people. If people decide to do this, that's fine. They can do it. If they don't decide, then that's fair enough. So the cost of it is nothing. I mean, we spend a fortune here very often on saving paintings for the nation that have no significance whatsoever to our social existence. So that's why I think it's pretty important. In closing, I'd like to thank the good people of Bristol who recently reminded us that we do actually take notice of statues, monuments and memorials. They're out there for a reason, I mean, generally these are erected under the control and direction of governments and elite institutions. But, and primarily displayed to celebrate achievements and excellence. Windrush Anchor has no such lofty aims. It's an independent project, and by solely petitioning the public, it will certainly query and expose our national conscience, I believe. So it could be like a Marmite thing, I guess. You either like it or you don't. But I mean, I tend to be quite optimistic about this, and I think that it could take get a lot of traction with people. But it's good to dream big. Let's be honest. I mean, this will take significant funding for the venture. So if you've got £5 or £500,000, I don't care if somebody comes in and pays that straight away, then every donation is crucial in order to make this happen, because the government are not going to do it. It's up to the people to actually decide whether they want to do this or not. Like I said, it's good to dream big, and who knows, somewhere down the line, we might attract the attention of a celebrity or celebrities with hearts and wallets to match. If you think about it, reaching the initial target that we've set for this would be like the entire nation clubbing together to purchase a medium-sized one-bedroom flat in central London, right? And I'd really like to think that with a catchment of 64 million people in this country, that is entirely achievable. For this is perhaps the one and only opportunity that we ever have or will have to get something tangible from the ship. So that's my thinking along the lines of like what this project is about. And I'd like to thank you, Michael, and you, Bailey, for hosting the online session to showcase our project. And I can also thank the fellow presenters who, even just by being here tonight, demonstrate their commitment to the campaign, because I believe that they feel that strongly about it. So I've kind of lit the touch paper, and I wanted to run away, but I'm being told by Patrick and David and Jessica that I have to keep trying to convince the country about all this. Well, I hope that what I've said tonight will kind of, set the ground out for that, perhaps.
Thank you very much, Max. You certainly didn't lower the tone, and I thought that your definition of the anchor kind of really brought things home for me, and kind of made a real sense of kind of why the anchor, and why it is so right. It's the right symbol for maintaining those memories. I mean, if I can kind of tell a story of my own, is that I say to my own son, who's 37 now, but I've been saying it to him all of his life, that you had a grandmother that came to this country with a carrier bag and some hopes and some dreams, and she has created a life for you and for me, and she's sent children to university and grandchildren to university, and this generation of people have just done some amazing things, you know. To start from where they started and to end up where they've ended up is monument in itself, but to have something that kind of anchors the kind of monument of their movement, I think is absolutely the right thing to do. Thank you very, very, very much, David, for your energy in lighting the litmus paper, and also for not lowering the tone. Any of our panelists want to say anything quickly whilst we before we start taking questions from the audience? All you need to do is to switch your microphones on, and we'll be able to hear you. So are there any last things that any of our panelists would like to say?
Yes, I would like to say something which Patrick mentioned earlier. It was the Windrush Monument, and because last year, it seems every year the government launches a new venture on Windrush Day, and last year it was the Windrush Monument will be erected at Waterloo Station. Well, I totally disagree. I think it should be in Brixton at Windrush Square, because that's where most of the Windrush generation made their homes, around the Cold Harbour Lane and so on. So I myself arrived in 1965, and David kindly found the information for me on the Ascania, and we arrived, and I don't remember my journey through Waterloo. So Waterloo is in transit. It's about where you make your home. It's a bit like the anchor. It's where you settle, where you make your memories and raise your family, and that's what a lot of them did in Brixton. So that's why I thought it should be in Windrush Square. Thank you.
Okay, we've got people in the chat asking for details of the GoFundMe page, and we we wouldn't have served our purpose very well if we let people leave today without telling them how they can donate and make donations to this project.
Michael, I've just put it up on the chat. There's a link there that people can click on, and that'll take them to it.
Mm-hmm.
And one point that I'll make about you know, there was discussion about the expense and everything like that, and you know, again, you know, this is not being taken from the government, and it will be expensive, but it will be an adventure. It will be an adventure that the public and the nation will be able to watch, because it's no doubt we'll have television documentary team on board, and that excitement and that uncertainty and tension and drama of the expedition will be used as a vehicle and a platform again to tell the Windrush story. We will reach more people with that expedition. People will have a vested interest in it. So when the anchor comes home, it will be the most famous anchor in British history.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I think we should close. I would like to thank all of our panelists for today. I'd like to thank you ever so much for kind of bringing us up to date with the kind of maritime history and where the ship was and where it sank and how it sunk. Is it sank or sunk?
Well, it's both, but one's a different tense.
All right, okay. So when it happened, the fire and everything else. Thank you, Jessica, for telling us about how we preserve the anchor when David brings it to you, and how you're going to kind of look after it for 2 years before, in some way, it gets revealed to the public. And David, of course, I take your point that the bringing of the anchor, the storing of the anchor, the search for the anchor is great television, is a really important part of the story, and a really good vehicle for the telling of the story. Thanks, Patrick. Are you there, Patrick? I can see Patrick's name, but I can't. Oh, there he is.
I'm here. Yes, yeah.
Thanks, Patrick, for always being there, and for all of the work that you've done around Windrush, not just around getting the anchor, but about getting the story out and kind of making it happen in the way that you've made it happen. Sometimes we don't celebrate people in our community enough, and I think that we should make it clear, and that we should find ways of celebrating the enormous work that you've done for this group of people. So thank you very, very much, Patrick.
Yeah. Can I add something real brief? I know time's against this. I just want to thank everyone for being. I want to thank you, Bele, for having the confidence to support this, because it's really important that this is a community dialogue and conversation, and we hope that people have got the mandate to go forward to raise the money. And as David explained, the journey. Everyone is now part of this journey. It's not just the core team. Everyone is part of this journey, and you're going to contribute in different ways. So please feel free to contact any of us to find out what's happening, or we'll have updates on the GoFundMe page as well. And then I just want to personally thank Max, because Max is the one that's brought us all together. And I know Max wanted to say, Patrick, I've done my job, I'm going away, I'm going to stay in Greenwich, and etc. But I just want to personally thank Max, because I know for him, it's, you know, because of your loved one that you lost dearly recently, and it's important to you, but it's important to all of us as well. And you know, if we're going to do this, it's going to be important. And as I said before, our goal, my personal goal, is the 75th anniversary of the Empire Windrush. In 2 years, 2 and a bit years' time, can we do it? And Obama would say, yes, we can. Yes, we can. I can't hear you. Yes, we can.
Thank you all very much. Thanks very, very much. Ubele, we're back with another webinar next week, aren't we, Patrick? What's the webinar next week that we're back with?
I don't know. I mean,
don't you know? Okay, I know. The next Monday we're going to be having a webinar on Monday evening, which is kind of thinking about racism. It's called Racism Where Next, and a kind of international exploration of kind of what's happening around the kind of African diaspora across the world. We have panelists from the United States, from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from Brazil, from Senegal, from Nigeria, and from lots and lots of other places in the world, looking at how do we connect as a diaspora to tackle racism and the impact of racism. So that's, go to the Ubele website, www.ubele.org, where you'll find out about all of the work that we're doing, and in particular, you'll find out about next week's webinar. Thank you all very, very, very much. Don't forget to go directly from here to the GoFundMe page. Don't forget to put it on your Facebook, to put it on your WhatsApp, to make a WhatsApp group, to find some ways of finding that million. Thank you very, very much for being here.